morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. I want to welcome all of our students and teachers to today's special high school program. This webinar was made possible by the Boone Foundation. We'd also like to thank additional supporters of our high school student program, the Steinmetz Foundation and the United World of the Universe Foundation. We had hoped to have a digital handbook loaded up on our computer screen on your right. Unfortunately, that's not working. So we'll make sure that all of our students and teachers receive this digital booklet right after the program. It is now my great pleasure to welcome today's program, How Gen Z Can Shape the Future of Technology. This will be led by Professor of Education and Informatics at UC Irvine, Mark Warschauer, Sara Davila, Head of Efficacy and Learning for Immerse. She will be joined by Dr. Veronica Alvarez, NIH-funded Biomedical and Health Informatics Postdoctoral Fellow in UC Irvine's Institute of Clinical Translational Science, and Dr. Viet Vu, Lecturer, School of Education, University of California, Irvine. Mark, we're so appreciative of you moderating today's program. Let me turn this important discussion over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. It's a real pleasure to speak to all of you. And I'd like to start by reaching out to our panelists and having each of them just spend a minute or two telling us who they are and the kind of work they're doing. Why don't we start with you, Veronica? Turn your microphone on, Veronica.
Is the mic on now? My name is Veronica Alvarez, and I am a postdoctoral fellow. I study robots in education, specifically robots for academic and social learning. And I have a presentation, quick overview of that I'm going to share with you. Collaborative robots for social learning. The next slide. And so every year there's 2.5 million children in the US who are homebound due to illness. And here you see a picture of 2 children. One is physically in person. And in my research, we use the robot for a child who can't attend due to medical conditions. And so they roll in. It's a completely mobile unit with real-time, video, audio and video capabilities. Next slide. And so I really look at this homebound experience. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, if you see on one slide, you see the typical things that are in your life, your family, your school, your community, and your peers. However, when you become sick, a lot of these are removed. And then in the last slide, you see these are able to come back via the robot. So they come back virtually, and we call it virtual inclusion. Next slide. And so we look at 3 different ways that this shows up in schools, either co-present, you're cooperating, or you're collaborating. And we hope for everyone that uses the robot to reach that 3rd level of collaboration where you're actually talking to people, engaging in the learning, and actively participating in your classroom. Next slide. Next slide. So this work with the robots, we recently received a National Science Foundation, National Robotics Initiative, and we're going to add an arm to the robot. So the robots we use right now currently do not have an arm or a hand, and most of the students have asked for one. So we're excited to find out for what will we use this arm and this hand for. And we'll be working with Stretch Robot by Hello Robot. And another project that we're doing, next slide. In the state of California, we're extending the work from the classroom for COVID-19 into robot-facilitated health equity for healthcare workers, and then also for community engagement, community events, specifically looking at Latinos in California, as they are the group most heavily hit. And so that is my research in a nutshell.
Thank you. That's fascinating, Veronica. Thank you very much. Sara, how about you?
So I'm Sara Davila. I'm the head of Efficacy and Learning for Immerse VR. We are a virtual reality language platform to help people learn English using virtual reality by being able to connect with their teachers and with others in institutions across the world. And I did bring a short video today to give you a bit of a taste of what that looks like if we want to load that up. So what you're seeing are students who are actually working together in a space where they are interacting and creating, but they're actually situated all over the world. And they're joining us through this crazy thing that you put on side of your head and beam into a virtual reality device. So that is a little bit of what we do. We're working to improve how we can communicate and collaborate with online learning so that you don't feel like you're sitting locked at your desk all day, but you can actually jump into a classroom, a restaurant, a wizard classroom, if you will, where not only are you learning to communicate in English, but you're doing it while doing really fun interactions and tasks, building different types of skills that are important for just being able to say hello to your friends, or for future where you want to be able to travel around the world, study in other countries, and collaborate with others to solve some of the huge problems that your generation is going to face. So super excited to be here and share some more about what we do as we go through the session today.
And how about you, Viet?
Hi, everyone. It's great being here with you today. So I teach at UC Irvine, and my research focus is on digital storytelling. And there are mainly the use of digital stories to really support literacy development, and especially for English language learners. There are two projects that I have going on right now. In one project, I have a team of undergraduate students, and we go to an elementary school. And what we do is we teach the students how to make digital videos of their research project. Because one of the reason why we do that is because a lot of them are English language learners. And even though they may understand what they're learning, understand the research that they're doing, they're not able to convey it, writing up a large research paper, but they're able to make a video of it, and they're able to use video footage, pictures, and a little bit of images and sound to really spice up their report. And so we find that that they're able to feel a little bit better about themselves, that they're able to articulate their ideas, their research through digital stories. Another project that's sort of in line with that is actually at the university at UC Irvine, and it's for one of the main writing courses that students have to take. So as an undergraduate student, they have to write, research papers, and some of these research papers can be really extensive, maybe 20, 30 pages long. And so as you can imagine, writing 20, 30 pages is really difficult because you're really trying to string together many different ideas, and then of course in incorporating sources. And so what we do is we teach students actually how to make a video of their research paper before they actually write it, so that way they can visualize it, and also for them to able to sort of script it out. And so by the time they get to writing their 20-page paper, it's not so difficult. So that's really my research focus, using digital stories to support literacy development.
Thank you. Thank you. I should point out that both Veronica and Viet started as doctoral students in my lab at UC Irvine, and now they've gone on, Viet as a faculty member, Veronica as a postdoc, and Sara's project was also part of an incubator at UCI. So they're doing terrific work. And Viet is a great example of what we call 21st century literacies. We're not only communicating in words now, but we're also, multimedia communication is so important these days. And I know, Viet, that you've got sort of a fascinating background about how you got into this whole field. Do you want to share a little bit of that?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I I came to the United States about 42 years ago, and at that time, I wasn't able to speak English, but I understood what was going on. I just couldn't write an essay about it, and I couldn't really convey my thoughts and what I had learned in the classroom. And so when I became a teacher, I always said to myself, I have to find ways to really support English language English language learners, or someone who might be struggling with the English language. Because as you know, it's really difficult trying to really learn English at the same time learn content. And so I stumbled upon digital storytelling when I was a high school teacher. Because at that time, I had a lot of students who were English language learners, and I saw what they were going through, and they were having a hard time, and they weren't doing their homework, but they love movies. And Jurassic Park was the big movie at that time, and they wanted to do some sort of video about Jurassic Park, but they wouldn't write a science paper in my class. They wouldn't do anything in my class, but they were willing to make a video, and that was really the sort of the seed that got me started down the digital storytelling path, because I realized that this is one way for these English language learners to really convey their ideas, complex ideas, and still demonstrate that to me that they understood the content. So that's sort of how I got into it.
Fascinating. And you also worked as a video producer in Japan for several years, didn't you?
I did. And what had happened was, I didn't have the experience. I graduated with a biochem degree. I was teaching science, and I didn't have the experience in filmmaking. I thought it was important, but I didn't have the experience. So I actually went back to film school to learn to get that experience. And the funny thing is, I had my friends, actually one friend of mine became the director for the Fast and Furious series. But I decided I should go back to school because that's what I came here for. So instead of going to the Hollywood route, I became a news producer, made educational videos, and then a professor to really share my ideas with other teachers, other people who might be interested in digital storytelling.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, how about your background, Sara and Veronica? What's something you wish you knew as a high school student and college student interested in STEM? Or what sort of skills have served you best throughout your studies and career? What would you recommend to our high school students here today?
Well, I can go first. The interest in STEM for me really started in high school. I took an auto shop class, and then I took woodworking and electrical, and I was always very much interested into kind of the mechanics and the hardware. And then in college, I was an English major, but I still was very fascinated by it. So I got a job in the physics department. And at that time, I set up their labs, and they were moving all of their syllabi. They were digitizing it. So I worked with DOS, and I did some coding to make the experiments and all of the physics department's syllabi work digitally. So during, for most of my classes, I did my English major work, and then on the side, I worked in physics. So I learned physics that way. One thing that, I would like high school students to know is that interest in the mechanical, the electric, the hardware, the physics as a job and a hobby, it was definitely pointing to where my interests were. I was also very interested in the English major. And so I'm very excited that now I get to work with robots. And I'm super excited that I get to co-create them and build them. So anyways, those interests were always there. I just didn't stop to step back and look at it. And so that's one thing I think when you're in high school, look and see what just interests you, because there's something there.
Yeah, my experience is a little different, and maybe radically different. When I was in high school, the height of technology was a mechanical typewriter. It was very exciting. All you could do was type on it. It actually had an ink reel that you had to load, and it typed letters on paper. Some of you may have seen these. There wasn't a lot of technology when I was in high school, and even when I went into college, technology wasn't a part of what I was doing. I actually did my undergraduate major in philosophy. So there were a lot of jokes in the 1990s when I was in school about a philosophy major is not going to get you very far. And in reality, my interest in technology and why I've always been interested in doing something with virtual reality and even just with integrated technologies comes a lot from science fiction. I was a crazy passionate reader when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school, and I really enjoyed reading different types of science fiction writers' predictions about what the future might look like. So if you've read Isaac Asimov, or if you've read Philip K. Dick, you've probably been inspired by tablets and robots and how all of these things could come together. But to explore my interest specifically in STEM, I took apart VCRs, much to my parents' horror frequently. I loved, if I could get my hand on a screwdriver and a piece of electronics, I would absolutely dissect that to find out how those things work. So for me, a lot of how I learned my STEM skills was really just digging in and taking things apart. When the internet started to become really available in the early 90s, I got fascinated by things like where you could go and build your own websites, learning how to do different types of coding in HTML. And I was able to build up a lot of those skills, which I eventually transitioned in my career to building different types of websites and services for English language learners, and really understanding how we could integrate technology as part of a communication service. And so now I've just been following how everything has evolved over the last 20 years and really looking into virtual reality and where that was going, because when I was a kid, some of the movies that explored VR were really interesting. So it's for me, I think one of the things that's really important as a high schooler is, even if you don't currently have access to the most interesting or engaging technology, or you don't have a cell phone or a smartphone, maybe you don't have a tablet or even access to a PC. I had none of these things when I was a child. Like, the most exciting bit of technology I had was a word processor. I didn't even own my own computer personally until about 2008, to give you an idea of how hard sometimes it was to get technology. But yeah, that's what I did.
Thank you. So one takeaway I get from all of this is how interdisciplinary the world has become. Let's say, my advice to high school students: you're interested in English, you're interested in psychology, you're interested in history. Don't be shy about taking that computer science class, or learning to code on your own, or whatever field you're in humanities or social sciences. Knowing more about computing and digital creation is really going to help you. On the other hand, you might be a hardcore computer science major. Don't be afraid to take that poetry or that literature or that philosophy class, because that's going to end up helping you as well. And bringing in your hands-on interests as well. I want to kind of get back to, what's going on with the pandemic and how we're kind of addressing that as people who are interested in educational technology. And I think you had something to share about that, Vian, right?
Right. And so, I think there's been a lot of interesting things that are happening, and I think with Sarah's work with virtual reality, obviously that's cutting edge, and there's a lot of cutting edge innovation that that's in response to everyone being online. But for me, I'm interested in something that's more immediate, and I think one of the really cool features that I've been asking for as an instructor is really the ability to collaborate in terms of video editing. And you guys are able to collaborate with Google Docs, Zoom, all these technologies, but editing has always been like an individual task, right? I mean, you can imagine years ago, everyone's hunched over watching somebody edit a video. But recently, they were able to make it so that students could actually collaborate using the platform WeVideo. WeVideo is created by Google, and maybe your schools already use it. But what's so amazing is that now everyone can actually edit together as though it's a Google Doc. that you can work on the same project across space, across time, which is something that was unheard of just until recently, just until a few months ago. So I think that's a really great innovation for what is happening right now, where everyone is not in the classroom, where everyone is spread out. So here's an example of that. Actually, this was an online class that I had taught this summer, and this is for elementary school kids. It was a summer camp, but they were able to use WeVideo, the collaborative feature, and none of them were in class together. They were far apart. They did it separately, and this was in response to COVID and to the mask wearing sort of message. Okay, so go ahead, play that video.
2020. Earth. Pardon me, do you have a mask, miss? I'm making one now. Why do you ask, miss? Just that people are dying. Haven't you heard, miss? Yes, I'm getting nervous. People are being reckless, irresponsible, not careful. They're not valuing the lives of others. We could be walking in the steps of a 1918 disease that we have suffered. You mean the Spanish flu? Yes. People, listen to the advice. Wear a mask. Listen more. Social distance or you'll get the COVID fast. Wanna stay ahead? Fools who aren't careful wind up sick. Yo, what time is it? Like I said. In 1918, disease broke out across the world, killing more than world wars, you see. Those mask slackers don't want it with me, cause I'll wear the flippin' mask around till we're free. In 2020 came COVID-19, a disease spreading faster than all fire we see, infecting, closing schools and locking people up in quarantine. In 1995 came Peter Sight, inventing a mask called N95. Came out of retirement to help us. So just wear the mask, respect others, and adjust. No more fuss. Let's get on a mask to save our planet and get this COVID-19 to pass.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, it's so great to see students being so creative to try to address a current situation. That certainly I didn't have the opportunities to do anything like that when I was in school, and it's just makes me really appreciate all the opportunities that kids have today, and which kind of brings me up more broadly. I mean, we've just seen an explosion of online learning in the last year, and some of it's been good, some of it's been bad. I mean, there's been a lot of challenges, but what do you all see as the potential of technology to improve the quality of education? And what are the challenges to bringing that about? I'll just throw that out to anybody who wants to respond. Veronica, did you have a comment on it?
I definitely see it as making most educational settings more inclusive, right?
Mhm.
The thing that I see with the robots is that we're removing that physical barrier of having to attend school. Many people don't realize that medical conditions like cancer, heart disease, kidney failure, these things prevent children from attending school. Online schools aren't necessarily for everyone, but if you can use this piece of equipment to attend school, you just reduce the getting ready, getting in the car, walking to class. A lot of these physical barriers where you can just log in and then go to school and control your robot around the school. So I see technology definitely as making environments more inclusive and including all members of the community regardless of their condition. With COVID-19, I think that's something that we all experienced now. We've all had a taste of being homebound, where it's too risky to go outside. So for a lot of conditions, especially in my study, that has always been the case. COVID-19 just expanded it to more people. So hopefully we'll be more empathetic and open to using, different technologies to include people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think from an education standpoint, one of the big things that we're going to see with COVID-19 is a lot of infrastructure change and understanding of what learning looks like. There's a real tension right now between what's called asynchronous learning, which is where you open up something and study by yourself, versus synchronous learning, which is when you're working together with your class. And what we're seeing right now are a lot of teachers struggling to deliver a really high quality synchronous experience, what you experience when you go to class and you can work with your partners, your peers, and collaborate. And we know from education research that collaboration, that interaction that you're doing with others, is what creates high quality learning and actually allows you to gain the skills that you need to be successful in the 21st century. So I think that one of the big challenges that we have to address, and one of the things that technology will be used most for, especially looking at AI for personalized learning pathways as a way to do asynchronous learning, that then educators will have to learn to leverage better inside of classes for synchronous learning experiences that really invite a higher level of critical thinking and interactive collaboration. I'm quite excited about that.
Interesting. And the do you feel like the changes that are taking place right now in the schools are going to have any kind of, permanent or long-lasting effect? I mean, everybody is thrown into emergency distance learning. What about when the pandemic's over? Do you think we're going to go back to the way it was? How do you see this playing out?
I think things will somewhat go back to normal, but I think we've certainly opened up our minds to possibilities, right? Having everyone shift suddenly online has forced everyone to put themselves in the shoes of someone who experiences this on a regular basis. And so there's been so much innovation and so many different ways to approach learning. I think we all definitely appreciate the synchronous learning and children's desire for that synchronous learning. I think a lot of the technologies that we're really using for education right now will extend into other areas of life. I know there was a huge interest in the robots. So all of my school districts that are using the robots started to use them for board meeting as things slowly opened up and then they closed again. But when things were slowly opening up, the people using the robots were educators who may never have had to use them before. And there's certainly more demand. And then our recent project, hospitals are now looking at how can we use these also. And so I think in a lot of ways, what we use in education has the potential to just really spread out to other areas of life.
Interesting. Now, I know that, all of you have been working on trying to introduce these technologies into schools. I imagine sometimes that goes really smoothly. Maybe a lot of times it doesn't. What do you all see as the main barriers to really realizing the potential of digital media and digital learning and digital tools in education in this country?
So I think, the resources. It's great that a lot of schools are obviously now they have no choice but to provide the resources, right? The Chromebooks, the broadband technology to access. So that's great. But I think what happened was, we threw teachers in, right? I mean, basically said, here you go, everyone. Here's a Chromebook, here's a laptop. You figure this out. And so I think there's going to be a reckoning at some point, and I think teachers are probably saying that, it's something that is possible, but I would definitely like to learn a little bit more. So I think teacher training is going to be an issue, so that they know how to really use it, because a lot of them didn't have a chance, and so they were making it up as they went along. So I think that's going to be definitely a big obstacle. but I think that's going to be actually great that they're going to be exploring now because they realize that maybe there is potential for it. So
I think one of the
nodding, Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
I think one of the other really big changes that we're going to see in education is we're going to stop looking at technology as a tool. Right now, when we think about technology, it's almost like a calculator, even though your cell phone is as more powerful than the computer that we actually use to go to the moon. All of that technology in the shape of your hand, but the actual computer that we used to do that 60 years ago weighed 3,000 pounds. So we have this access technology, but we still see it as something that we use like a wrench or a tool or a screwdriver. And we haven't entirely seen how that can be fully integrated into learning experience. So it's not just watch this video on YouTube and now discuss it in class, but really a lot more of what Viet is doing. It's like now you're actually going to create a video together collaboratively to address a real problem, to actually push forward a solution. And you're going to have to do that creatively with people in 7 different time zones working across the world who might all come from different language backgrounds, very different socioeconomic experiences. And by bringing technology together and allowing that to be the thing that becomes a great equalizer, you really unlock human potential and what we could potentially do as a society when we begin to work together to solve these problems, seeing technology not just as something that might be a tool to a solution, but actually something that becomes the infrastructure that we use to get to those kinds of solutions.
That reminds me of a great saying I heard once. You know, educators need to think about the internet as less like a hammer and more like Australia. You know, it's not just a tool that you pick up to pound in a nail. It's an entire new context and environment that can potentially reshape all our interactions, all our futures. How about you, Veronica? What barriers have you encountered?
One of the biggest barriers I've encountered in my research pre-pandemic, and I'm sure it's been much improved, teachers were very resistant to being on a screen. And so I think we're over that now. Oh, I can't have a camera on me. I'm not comfortable in front of a camera.
Darn it, I forgot to put on my cat filter for today's meeting. Actually, I'm really a cat, and I put on my professor filter.
Right. So the fear of those mistakes when you are the only teacher in your school, was huge. And I think now we've all seen that we will survive if we leave the mic on, and if we are a cat, and if we make a mistake. There's a new day, and we just keep going. So that was probably one of the biggest challengers on the teacher side. And then students were also afraid to have the face screen, to be seen on the face screen. And again, that's pre-pandemic. I'm pretty sure students are possibly more comfortable now with the Zoom and with being on the screen. So I'm excited to see how those barriers may have changed. But those were probably the biggest ones. Was the newness of it.
We've talked a lot about teachers. What about students? How can students play a role in shaping the evolving educational environment in which they have such a personal stake?
For my research, students are the ones who started it. They wanted to go back to school. And so the robots were not deployed from school districts. It was students that said, I've seen this robot on TV, why can't I use it? And their families said, well, I guess you could. So I think in a lot of ways, students are the drive for the innovation and the change.
And one thing I think that's important about that is, if I understand correctly, those chronically ill children, a teacher got sent out to their house to help them. But what they were missing was that direct in-person communication with their peers. I mean, that's one thing I'm hearing from all of you. This collaboration, this working together, this human contact. We often think of technology as pitted against, human contact or technology. But what I'm hearing from all of you is that the best uses of technology are the ones that bring us together, that amplify human contact, that allow that allow that child who has a heart condition or cancer or immune condition to not only have a teacher visit them once a week, but to participate in their classroom on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas where students really have an advantage over their teachers when it comes to technology in the classroom. You have a lot more time than your teachers do. So there you have a great advantage in that if you're learning how to use that technology really well and understanding it, really go into the teacher's manual, unbox it, really open it up. You can actually help your teachers understand what the potential is of these types of technologies. And when I've seen students really dig under the hood of what you can do with learning, teachers will sit back and their minds are just blown. Like, I had no idea you could do that with Zoom. But students will figure it out and really impress you. So I think students, for a lot of us, will really drive innovation because they can help us understand what their interests are and what your interests are as technology users, and then demonstrate that potential to teachers.
Thank you. Well, speaking of students, I understand that some of the students who are participating today are starting to share their questions with us. So I'd like to introduce Jessica to come and join us and begin sharing those audience questions with us.
Thank you all so much. We do have a lot of questions. This first one comes from Valeria, and I'll let you guys decide who wants to jump in on this. What are your thoughts about artificial intelligence?
I'm going to
Sarah, do you want to take that? Okay, Mark's going to go for it. Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in on that, and I'll tell you why. We have an amazing project. Kids learn best from interaction. We know that, right? So, for example, I'll bet a lot of you, you're not that old that you don't, that you can still remember watching Dora the Explorer or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. When you're watching those TV programs, Dora comes on and asks you a question. That's to try to get your brain going, to try to not be so passive, to get you interacting with the TV program. But guess what? When you talk to Dora, she can't reply. She doesn't understand what you're saying. Well, one of our research projects, and this is why I love being a professor, because you do such exciting things. We're partnering with PBS Kids on a new TV show, and if you have younger brothers or sisters, you might have seen it. It's called Eleanor Wonders Why, where a little bunny rabbit explores the world, where kids watch episodes of Eleanor Wonders Why on their iPad or their smartphone. And in the middle of the episode, Eleanor pops up and asks them questions, but using kind of technology like Siri or Alexa, which is called a conversational agent, Eleanor can understand the kids' response and dialogue with them. And our research shows that kids learn much, much more about the science going on in the episodes that way. So the basic message from here is AI is so exciting and it's so fun and it's so related to lots and lots of great ways to learn through conversation and interaction. So if you have a chance to learn more about AI, whether it's at a summer camp or a class or volunteering in a lab, if any of you come to UCI, please contact me and say, Professor Warschauer, I saw you in this webinar and I want to get involved in your lab, because we depend on our undergraduates to help us with this research. Let's go to another question.
Perfect. Well, and thank you so much, because in that handout that we're going to send out, we'll have a lot of resources like that. So make sure to check your email for that. This next question comes from Alex. He says, my question is for all panelists. In this age of remote learning, we are seeing more and more how technology is supplanting human teachers in offering efficient, personalized education to individual students. As we transition back to in-person learning and technology like this continues to advance, what do you foresee might change as the new norm for education? Who wants to jump in here and take that?
I mean, I'm happy to answer that one because I spend a lot of time with it. One of the things that you're going to see is we're going to maximize in-person time for collaboration. So this whole collaboration interaction thing, it's not going away. If anything, it's going to become more of the norm. The classroom environment that used to have desks and siloing students or like placing students as individuals and keeping you away from your peers, all of that is going to change. If you're going through a learning experience where you're learning knowledge, you might do that synchronously with an AI-informed learning pathway. But to really understand it and dig into it, that's what you'll be coming into the classroom to do, is you're going to see a lot more task-based work, a lot more problem solving, and a lot more encouragement of learners to become researchers and active in their own learning experiences. So those are just some of the things that we're currently starting to see and we anticipate as we move back to the classroom.
Thank you so much. This question comes from Estrella. Were your parents supportive about your interest in technology? Sarah, how did they feel about you taking that VCR apart?
I'll just answer very quickly. My parents both dropped out of high school. You know, they couldn't even program a VCR, much less like, you know, understand anything about computers. So I had to figure this all out myself. I don't know about anybody else.
My parents wanted me to be a doctor. And so, you know, obviously I didn't become a doctor, but yeah, they were appreciative of my steps. But, you know, it's at a certain point in your life, I think you have to make the best decision for you.
If I can jump in on this one too, no, my mother had no interest in the STEM piece. I think that's probably, you know, she was afraid I would be a mechanic, and she kind of discouraged me from fixing the car, which I did. So no.
My parents wanted me to stop taking apart the VCR and become an accountant. And neither of those things happened.
So listen to your heart, bring your parents along as you go.
Exactly. This one comes from Jarvis. It's for Sarah. Did you use applications like VR Chat and Rec Room as a foundation for your application?
So it's really interesting. We've looked at a lot of the different social interactives. So VR Chat, Alt VR, especially Facebook venues, which are all of these different spaces where you can go and talk to other people from around the world. And those absolutely informed some of what we were creating. But we also wanted to build the specific application, the Immerse VR application, to make it so that teachers could actually manage a learning experience. And the challenge that you get if you're just jumping into a chat room is it's really kind of a free-for-all. But absolutely, we're still looking at different game environments, not just chats, but also things like Robo Recall and just like fun games like Swords of Gargantuan to find out what is it that VR does well and how far can we push the boundaries on that. And if we are pushing those boundaries, what makes sense from a learning perspective to bring that in for language learning experiences or even to take that a little bit further. So you definitely look at everything. And if you're going to work in technology at all, you should always be experimenting. So it doesn't matter if it's a game or if it is a science lab STEM project. All of those things are providing absolutely some different types of inspiration for what we're doing.
Vanessa asks, was there a time where you got discouraged? Maybe when you're trying to come up to these projects, if any of you have any stories you can share.
I think that happens throughout the whole process, I think. I mean, just the fact that, you know, my parents weren't interested in education or, you know, technology, but also at the same time, just coming up with the research projects themselves. Sometimes you just, you know, you have an expectation that some things will happen and it doesn't. And I think Veronica brought up earlier about how, you know, there was a lot of pushback from teachers. And so, you know, as we try to, you know, sort of, you know, implement these ideas in schools, there was a lot of pushback, not just from teachers, but in general, there's pushback. So I think that you become discouraged, but I think it's something that, you know, you always have to push through if you want to be successful.
I would like to jump in on this one too and say just the idea of the robots in 2012, it was not that well accepted, but that guy right there, Mark Warschauer, he saw the potential in it. And so he stuck with it, and he actually will be helping with the NSF grant. We're going to do a curriculum on social robotics. So it is discouraging, but having someone alongside that also believes in it, I think can really help through those challenging times.
Yeah.
I just want to add something to this, Jessica. You know, you might think, oh, I'm a professor at the University of California. It's like success after success after success. But I just had a major grant proposal that our team of 5 people spent 3 months working on, turned down. You know, 3 out of 4 of the grant proposals I write get turned down. 3 out of 4 of the articles I submit get rejected. So it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. And especially with new technologies, you know, you only learn by failure. So we really all have to develop an attitude. You try, you try, you try, you try, and you know, just keep picking yourself up. And I, looking around at some of the people in this room, and I know their history, and I know some of the personal challenges that they haven't discussed necessarily, but they have been exemplars of that.
Thank you. This one's for Sara and Veronica. How does it feel to be part of the few percentage of women that go into the engineering/computer science field? And that question is from Casey.
So I would, you know, I'm so excited to do this Los Angeles World Affairs Council because I am from Los Angeles. So I grew up just outside of LA. I went to San Gabriel High and Alhambra High.
Grant High.
Also another Californian, but you know, in moving into the tech space, you know, we talk about these interests that you have and the things you want to do. And I think when, you know, I was in high school and college, it was even less accepted that it is now. And there are definitely still barriers. And after every talk that I give on the robots, I'll have, you know, 2 or 3 other young scholars who are female reach out to me and try to figure out how I did it and how they can do it. And so I think that just being visible and with it will slowly, you know, draw in more women into STEM and scholars. But I would say don't be discouraged, and look for the women who are out and speaking and reach out to them. But it is challenging. And I'll let Sara.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me personally too, it was always kind of a surprise to end up in technology. It was something that I aspired to, but as a woman, as a Latino, I was not sure that I would ever really be able to break into that. So I would say it's really easy to become discouraged, but if you're really good at what you do, if you're really passionate and you are absolutely unwilling to stop, you have to be willing to fight, to break down barriers, to get into conversations, to invite yourself on a project sometimes, to really just demonstrate if you have a passion for something, that you can absolutely achieve that. And again, with my personal history, I never would have imagined that I would end up here. If you talk to young Sara, she would have told you I probably would have ended up as an accountant. So it really is a lot of just being willing to embrace your dreams and take off and do that, and work with the teachers that are there to support you. I absolutely recognize that I had some insanely high quality educators when I was a child who encouraged me to stick with it, to stick with the coding that I was doing, to keep taking apart the VCRs. And I really appreciated that. So look for the people who are willing to help you. And that might not always be inside of your family. Sometimes that might be inside of your school. Sometimes that might be your peers. Sometimes that might be people on a webinar. Feel free to reach out to all of us. But absolutely find people that are going to be there to empower you and help you make that success. And anything then becomes possible.
Thank you so much. How would you advise students who are trying to figure out if STEM and technology is the right field for them? How does technology allow you to continue your other passions if it does? And that question is from Sabrina.
Well, let me try to answer that. When I started college, I went to Grant High School in Los Angeles. Any Lancers out there? And I'm a big Lakers and Dodgers fans for life, in case if you have any Lakers or Dodgers fans there. My mother went to Roosevelt, so we've been in LA a long time. But when I started college, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I started off as a psychology major. And as a psychology major, you know, this was when computer science was just starting. I eventually took some computer science classes, and I couldn't decide whether to change my major or keep psychology, but I just kept the psychology as the major. And I eventually got into learning and education, which is very related to that. And then here I came around in my career, and I'm a major scholar at looking at how computing and computer science and artificial intelligence intersects with education. So there's lots of linkages back and forth. And that's one of the great things about our educational system compared to a lot of other countries. I've been in countries where, you know, you apply to a certain major as a high school student, and then you're stuck in that for life. Here you have a lot of opportunities to go back and forth. So as I said, you know, when you get to college, take that philosophy class, take that computer science class, take that physics class, and take that English literature class. And that will help you see what you're most interested in. And I think you'll all be pleasantly surprised that you'll be able to make connections across that, because that's the way the world is going these days.
Thank you so much. Dr. Vu, this next question is for you from Jamie. Do you believe with the digital storybook idea that the language barrier that affects many non-English speaking students will be broken and will lead to mutual understanding between students of different languages and cultures?
I definitely see that, you know, as you know, because I've seen so many digital stories, and you know, I have my students share their digital stories with each other, and so one of the comments that you see that pops up a lot is that, wow, I didn't know that that's what you're going through, or I didn't know that aspect about you. And so I definitely see that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in digital storytelling, because it's not just, you know, here's a cool TikTok video, or here's you know, some, you know, YouTube video. It's really about storytelling, conveying your message, communicating your ideas. And by doing so, I think we're really, you know, students are sharing parts of themselves. And so I do see that, a lot of that happening.
Thank you so much. This question is from Julian. I've heard a lot about the positives from technology. However, is there some setbacks from this? For example, I want to go into med school. What are some positives and possible negatives that can occur with this use of technology? Thank you in advance.
Oh, I'd love to take that because medical training right now is being absolutely revolutionized by virtual reality. Apologies. In fact, there are several institutions in the last week who have just added VR training courses to different surgical teams as well as to their nursing programs. So one of the things that's actually becoming really exciting is the ability of technology to make fields that used to be extremely expensive, very challenging to train in, and had real world potential, like very negative consequences. If you're trying to practice for surgery, the last thing you want is for a patient to die on the table. But with virtual reality, they're actually integrating students with world-class surgeons to operate on virtual patients and actually learn how to build up these surgical technical skills. And then those are being transferred into actual medical situations. And it's not just with the medical industry. We're seeing this in aerospace. We're seeing this in military careers as well. In fact, we're moving towards what we think of as a mixed reality future. We're moving towards a society that by 2025, what you think of as reality will incorporate several different types of technology. And we're not even going to be living in this reality as the only thing that we're experiencing. So there's really so much potential there. But challenges with cost, challenges with infrastructure, these are definitely also things that we're going to need to address to make sure that you can get access to the types of tools and the technology to learn those skills so that everyone has an equal opportunity to excel there.
Thank you. For Mark, can you speak to your experience with using gaming technology for learning?
Sure. I can talk about one project that one of my PhD students worked on, which was how to use the massively multiplayer video game World of Warcraft for language learning. He took students who had taken a year or two of Spanish, and he wanted to give them more opportunities to use it in realistic ways. So now I know you're saying you live in Los Angeles, you know, anybody can just walk out of their house and use Spanish all the time, which is true. But imagine, you know, you grew up in parts of the United States where that, you know, wasn't necessarily true. Or you imagine you grew up in a small town in China and you were learning English. So he had students play the Spanish version of World of Warcraft. And that gave them a lot of opportunities to, you know, communicate with other players in Spanish, to see the commands written in Spanish, to see things written in Spanish and see them happening in the screen. and it gave him a much more realistic way. And I think this overlaps a lot with what we're seeing with VR, where people will be playing. The military is certainly a great example of this, where there's all sorts of learning of military skills through gaming, often incorporating VR. So all of these things are going to come together. So we do have a video game production major at UCI, and if you're interested in gaming and learning, please come to UCI and work on that. And
thank you so much.
Okay. Did we have a last question, or should we move on?
I'm going to throw one last question out to all of you guys, and just if there's any final advice or recommendations for where our students, if they're interested in going into coding or computer science or digital storytelling, just where you might direct them, what resources there are out there that you're familiar with, so they can look into those.
If you haven't learned computer science before, one thing I encourage you to do is, just go online and download a copy of Scratch and start playing around with that. It's a real friendly, easy way to get into computer science, and all of you as high school students, should be able to pick it up like that. That's just one piece of advice that I have. Others?
Yeah. For me personally, I would really recommend reading Humanities. I know it doesn't sound obvious with STEM skills, but I have found that having a really strong background in philosophical implications and ethics has served me extremely well in technology. And I do think it's really important for anyone who's interested in getting into the field to really get well read, read the humanities, and be prepared for that, because it's an important part of STEM.
I would go back to kind of the pattern you're seeing here. Number one, of course, please go to college. Just go. Once you're in there, they make you pick a major after a certain point. But always build in a class for yourself that is a class you're just interested in. Yeah. Just like that would be interesting. Allow yourself the freedom to take those interesting classes, or classes you think might be interesting. They might not be. I took music theory. It was horrible. But I learned music theory is not for me. But that is what you do in college, right? Is you experiment, you go, you look, you try to think new of things in different ways. So go to college and allow yourself the freedom to take classes that are of interest to you.
And it's never, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, my recommendation is, of course, with digital storytelling, it's all about the story. So definitely pay attention to your English teachers when they talk about the story structure. But another great resource that a colleague of mine just sort of developed is the website myhero.com. So if you go on that website, you'll see a whole bunch of videos made by people from around the world, but also at the same time, there's a lot of resources that teach you about digital storytelling.
And my just final comment is, it's never too late. Don't feel like, oh, everybody else already knows coding or computer science, or I'll be embarrassed, or I'll be the only girl in the class, or I'll be the only Latina in the class, or, just do it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's where you're going from here. It's not what you've done so far.
Awesome.
So
thank you so much for all of your insight, and for joining us for today's panel. And students, thank you for all of your great questions. Mark, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to thank the council for inviting us here, and I'd very much like to thank the panelists for coming. I really want to thank all of the students that are here. I'm pretty easy to find. Just type my name into Google, and that's an advantage of having an odd name. Just type my name into Google, you'll find me easily. Send me an email, ask me about UCI, ask me about your careers, just say hello, and I hope to be in touch. So I'm going to turn it back over. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim, and Kim will take it from here. So thank you again, and have a great 3-day weekend.
Mark, thank you so much for moderating. And Viet, Sarah, Veronica, your stories, your expertise, sharing your experiences, that was so interesting. We just so much appreciate your time. For the students, just a reminder, Christina Shabanava, our membership manager, will be sending out the digital booklet right after this programs. And if you have any questions, you can reach us on our website, and we'll get you out all of the information you need. So thank you for participating. We have also some upcoming programs you might be interested in. On February 19th, we have Bill Gates on with award-winning actor Don Cheadle, and they're going to be focusing on Bill Gates' new book on climate change. And then in April, we're going to have another high school program on U.S.-China relations. And in May, another high school program in partnership with the RAND Corporation on what students can learn from COVID as future leaders. So please go to our website at lawacth.org and stay in touch with our programs and send us questions. And we'd love your ideas for future high school programs. Again, to the panel, this was fabulous. Thank you so very much. Everybody.